guys, welcome. A slightly different blended agenda to you today in terms of location. We've moved to accommodate our guests. We find ourselves in the Helderberg region today at a pub with a long legacy, big history. The pub is called St. Andrews and it's inside the Lord Charles Hotel. We'll show you a little bit about that later. But our guests are from this area, from the Somerset West area in Cape Town. So I decided a bit of a drive today and come and visit them. So welcome, guys. We're chatting with Wessel and with Cornell today. These gentlemen both work with very deep emotional issues. Wessel particularly around guys, and Cornell just generally with people. He's as you will see on the screen, a psychologist and a counselor, and often addresses emotional issues. Let's start with you, Cornell, and let's start on a fairly light note. You and I, we have a bit of a history, don't we?
Absolutely. I think it's about, 25 years. And for those that do not know, in 1998, we did a program, AM Today, and we were like a small broadcast unit that went around the peninsula for that morning's input. And every morning we had a different location, and we had to get ready by 6. So 6 we had a check-in with the main studio, and then there might have been 3 or 4 crossings. So that was my getting to know Bobby from a distance and then very close.
Fun and games back in the day. I'll show you some footage from AM Today way back when in the late 1990s when I was on camera doing all sorts of crazy things like bungee jumping out of the cable car and all sorts of things like that, interviewing interesting people back then as well.
Today is our 270th show. And
sunrise. They say 11 before 6, but already we're sort of halfway there already. Nice to be with you once again.
And in our headlines, the 25-year-old.
Good morning, viewers, and good morning to the rest of the crew.
You might want to just check out my taste this morning. They're all going to be rocking up here around about 7 o'clock. Come around to Camps Bay Beach in your bikini. We're going to be playing a bit of volleyball. The Bay Hotel has set up a lovely 5-star breakfast for us at this moment.
Cornell here was one of the people behind the scenes, making sure that you heard and saw me properly back then. So thank you for that. And you've subsequently studied and become a psychologist. That's a big leap.
Yeah, I during that time, while I was doing this TV work, I was studying full-time. So this helped to pay for my studies. So I'm very grateful that I was able to be part of this small OB unit. And yeah, I did it for that year, and I think it's that October we basically wrapped it up. But since then, I have finished my degree and I've opened my own practice here in the Somerset West, and the rest is history.
So I helped to put you through school, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. And you gave me some pointers when I didn't know what to do, writing exams. You're like, I'll just put that down.
No, I didn't. And then Wessel here, you are with an organization also based in Somerset West called Men Care. What does Men Care do, Wessel?
So I'm based in Somerset West, but Men Care is a global campaign. And I need to clarify that Men Care is not an organization. I work for an organization called Equimundo, which is an international organization. We're quite small. We're only just about 20 people, but we work all over the world on issues related to gender equality, but particularly from a masculinities perspective. So we do a range of work with men. And I've done this work personally with groups of men and a lot of research, and also more recently some policy work. And first of all, I always say this, my main job is being a dad. I'm a father of 2 children. My daughter is 10 years old and my son is 7 years old. And then in my spare time, I do all of this other stuff that I actually get paid for.
Well, you get paid for being a dad as well, but it takes a while.
Exactly.
A good couple of years before we get there.
Yeah.
So blended families, is this a conversation that you have on the regular with men in particular, trying to deal with the challenges that they have to deal with in their blended home?
Yeah, it often comes up. You know, when we were doing dads groups in Cape Town, we did fathers groups for young men who are either expectant or new fathers. And what often seemed to be a focus of the conversation was the fact that the couple were separated before the baby was born even, and that they were coming to the group. We seemed to have a group that really drew guys together who were trying to solve this issue of how do I bridge the gap between myself and my child and have contact with my child in a way that my family and the other family respects and honors, and in a way that I can have a relationship with my child. I think something that we found with these groups, but also in the research, is that men care about care. Men want to be involved on multiple surveys, on a statistical level, but also at a very deep personal level. The intention of men to be involved in children's lives is clear. And I think in the context of a blended family, that's often a constellation or a system that a father or a man might not expect. And then having a group like that, like the ones that we hosted, was often quite useful for them to hear what others have done. So in certain contexts, it comes along with, inslahulu or lobola or other processes that some cultures require for you in order to demonstrate your commitment to paternity. So we were doing the groups around Cape Town, in Khayelitsha and Mfuleni, mostly in townships where the culture of parenting was grounded in the isiXhosa culture. So inhlahulu and lobola were big topics. But I don't think it's limited to that culture. I think it's a topic that extends way beyond that particular group.
You touch on a very interesting point there, Wessel, and there's this pervasive belief worldwide, and the judicial systems in the world tend to support this, that when there is a relationship that breaks up, the moms often end up being the main caregiver. They end up with custody of the child, even though they may, and I say this with some trepidation here because there will be some blowback on this, even though they may be not as good a parent as, say, the dad is, and even though the dad is a lot more willing maybe to be that parent. And this has been going on now for decades, if not centuries. And I see there's a tide that's slowly starting to turn in this regard now. There are a lot more, and I don't know if this is your experience, a lot more single dads these days than I think there've ever been before. Is this something that you come across?
Sure. I do think we're seeing more single fathers. One of the projects that I work on is the State of South Africa's Fathers Report. And in 2021, we actually tried to tell both sides of the story. So on the one hand, we documented the experiences of fathers who were saying that they are the victims of something called parental alienation. And, this is a hotly contested topic. It was recognized as a formalized mental health condition in the WHO registry, not in the DSM-5, but in the WHO. And then it was removed again because there's no evidence that it's actually a syndrome. But many parents, and I'm mostly fathers, but many parents do have the experience of being alienated from their child by the other biological parent. So we told that side of the story. On the other hand, we felt it was really important to speak about the difficulties that single mothers face who are financially dependent on the fathers of their children and who are often neglected and have to deal with the bureaucracy and the hard work to launch a case against the father to get to the point of maintenance being paid. Those two are different topics, but it's basically the challenges that many mothers in a separated situation face and many fathers in a separated situation face.
It's also the stereotypical story, isn't it?
Yes.
Where there's a single mom battling for access to funds for the child that she's raising by herself. The other side of the story never gets told. I mean, that gender often flips these days, I find.
Right.
Men often raising their child or their children by themselves, the mom's not being involved.
Yes.
Or trying very hard, and this is what I'm going to steer the conversation towards with you, Cornell, being in a home where there is there are children that's not biologically theirs and struggling with an absent father who wants to be involved and not quite being able to do the parenting as effectively as they might want to. This is something that I've come across fairly frequently. Have you at all, Wessel?
Yes, I have. So in my personal research for my doctorate, I tracked 5 families in the Stellenbosch area, and I've encountered so much research done on the poor by the privileged.
Yes. Say that louder, please, for the people in the back.
So US or white academics studying poor black people, to be really clear, and to put the racial dimension on it as well. And I felt it's actually not. It's not fair, and it's also biased. It gives us pictures of what's happening in a particular context with a very particular lens, firstly, but then also only looking at one group of people. So I did my own study of groups of, families of parents and children who were in my daughter's school. So basically peer groups to me. So this is Stellenbosch, upper income, mostly white families. Some of them were mixed race. 1 or 2 of them were blended families and it was a really, really interesting sample. And there was one family where the father, the name I gave him, it's not his real name, but the name I gave him was Marius. And he had met his wife when she was still young, when she was 17. He was already married to his first marriage. And then they met again 10 years later when she was in her 20s. And they remembered that they had interacted. They didn't have any romantic interaction when she was under 18, but that there was a spark there that then revived when she was in her 20s. They fell in love. He ended his marriage. At the time, she was already in a marriage with her first partner, and she had 1 child. And he hadn't had any children. So, and she was also kind of in a context where it was expected that she marry the man that she had married first. It wasn't really her choice. It was a very tight, I guess, religious context. Oh, here's the spring rolls.
There's ours.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simba. That looks delicious. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sorry, you were saying
So,
this.
no. So to cut the story short, they had set up a new family with their 2 daughters. They had their own biological child, but they also had the child that she had, the child from her first marriage.
Yes.
And this older daughter, the name I gave her was Lisa, she often spoke about, Marius is my dad, but I also have my real dad. But then she would say, he's not my real dad, he's just my real dad.
No. Okay. All right.
And then the mom told me, as the researcher, yes, because Marius is the real dad, because he does the hard work of parenting.
I see.
He's and she experiences him as her real dad.
And did you find that he could parent as in discipline as well? And could you find that there were any challenges with her real dad, say, when he did discipline and parent?
Yes. So he did. I mean, he complained about the fact that the original biological dad almost had this romantic air around him. He could do anything, and she would talk about it for weeks, because he was. I mean, I'm an adoptive father, and I know it's similar to the narrative of the so-called ghost kingdom, of there's this fantasy wonderful world where my real parents are. So in this context, she put this allure and this glamour to her father taking her fishing, a biological father. But the one who packs the lunchbox, does the homework, says, no, you have to now brush your teeth, no, this is bedtime, he's boring.
Yes. And it cuts.
And it cuts.
It cuts deep,
Yes,
actually.
exactly.
Because as you say, the biological dad can literally do anything every 6 months,
Yes.
no matter how small.
Yes.
And that thing is elevated to something phenomenal and
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
Whereas your daily grind is often overlooked
Yeah.
and even maybe, resisted often.
Yes.
Yeah.
But something that was clear to me was that, and I see this as, not only in the context of blended families, but in my own life, and also in other contexts of parenting, that attachment and bonding comes from the trust that's generated with the grinding work, with the hard care work. And
But you need to be patient with that because
you need to be
that
patient.
takes years.
It does take years. But the trust that she has in her second father, in Marius, or her main father, is much more than she has in her biological father, because they've tested that.
So, but sorry, Cornell, that I'm keeping you waiting, but here's the thing with that, though. The thing with that is that this trust that develops over time is important, and I don't want to minimize it. But the love that you as a stepdad crave from that child is often missing for a very, very long time, because that love belongs exclusively to the biological dad. And you always feel that. You can never, the hug isn't quite the same, the closeness isn't quite the same. And you observe that from a distance and you see how that dad is treated, biological dad is treated. There's a lovingness that is, bloed is dikker as water, blood is thicker than water, they say. And you can never quite step into that role. You might get similar, but it's never quite the same, isn't it? I think.
And I think, I mean, my guess would be children understand the dynamic and use it in order to gain leverage and power within their relationship with the parents as well.
Oh, kids are manipulative like that.
Exactly.
I hear you exactly. Let me jump to Cornell. Cornell, and I've said the statistic to you a little bit earlier, that the divorce rate worldwide is hovering around 50%. I think it's 51%. But the divorce rate for blended families, people who choose to get married after having had a first marriage, is sitting above 70%. And I'm just wondering whether that's got to do with maybe a first marriage, years and years of, I don't know, emotional neglect, not being happy, feeling used, feeling neglected, whether that makes you jump into a new relationship that has a lot of promise to it, and then kind of knocking your head once you're there. I wonder if that's got something to do with it. I don't know if you had any comments on that.
I think many times people, once they've broken up, they are hurting, and they so really want to have someone to share that hurt with, because the love of their life is no longer available, and there's probably good reason for that. And then they might find someone that is appealing to the immediate desires and saying, yo, this might be the one. But they come with unresolved baggage into that relationship, not knowing the partner or the person that they're meeting, what their background is. So I do think that many times people do not learn from their mistakes. They just tend to repeat it. And I think there's also the urgency of wanting to have a partner close by, and then throwing caution to the wind and saying, yeah, it's 6 months. Yeah, we've covered the basics. There's chemistry. It's working. And the next moment they're married, and now the real life happens. The second weekend the kids come and they're like, yeah, we did discuss this, but it's different living it than just discussing it. And now the tacky eats the tar, and now they're like saying, okay, we got to sort some stuff out. But it's always more difficult to sort something out at a time of war than at a time of peace.
So guys, for a quick break from our fascinating conversation, to tell you about one of our sponsors today, these PivotHead point of view glasses. This is their first gen one. I love them. They've got new ones on the market. Go and Google them. You get my point of view, or in your case, your point of view. They record. You can take stills with them, and they do about 30 minutes of video, really high quality video, high quality sound. Right now, I'm going to switch these around and you'll see what I'm seeing. That is my crew right over there. You can do exactly the same thing. Check out PivotHead. And again, thank you guys. Back to our conversation about blended agenda.
And mostly these things appear when the two lovers, or being so keen on each other, are now finding differences. And I think with blended families, it's specifically, or most of the instances I've been involved with is it's related to how can you say that to my child? So the parent would then come in defense of his or her own child when the other parent is saying, no, that's not acceptable, I won't stand for that. And suddenly we have this caveat of two lovers and now their kids. It's like, but who's now the priority? Is it the kid or my partner? And that might be the start of big problems.
And if you had a particularly acrimonious split from your ex, either one of you, there might be some niggling from the exes as well, wanting to muddy the water even more. Interestingly, and I want to explore this with you a little bit because we're speaking from a male perspective, not ignoring the ladies entirely, but from a male perspective. I find sometimes, and some people have said this to me, that moms who have gotten divorced from their child or their children's dad have a sense of guilt that they carry with them because that child's dad is no longer there, no longer in the house. So when they continue their parenting, they do it with a bit of guilt. So they become a little bit more permissive. They allow the child a little bit more than they otherwise would. Also, dad's not around to temper that and to be a balancing force in the child's life. Now, if she then remarries somebody different, 2 or 3 years later, say, and now you got a man in the picture, and maybe he's a little bit more of a disciplinarian, as us men tend to be. We want the child to do things in a particular way, or go to bed on time, or not have something sweet at 11 o'clock at night, that sort of thing. Mom might jump in at that point in defense of her child, and the child might resist and feel like this is an ogre, this is a tyrant, this is a dictator in my life, I don't like this man. And you find conflict happening largely because, and maybe men, this is where men need to, and I'd like you to address it, Cornell, maybe men need to address that need to want to, let's say, control the situation, especially if it's a blended situation that comes from a very different domestic culture.
So I think that's the big issue at heart of men not wanting to step in at the start because they want to make the moment as attractive as possible, and then the little one is running around and the dad says he's so cute, and it's actually quite he's allowing the little one to go, and the mom's like, this is amazing, he's so kind, he's so accepting of my children, and then once the reality of marriage happens, then he's like saying, all right, now I'm going to turn on the screws, and suddenly the mom's like saying, but who are you? Because that's not the
man I married.
That's not the man I met, And
why do men, sorry Cornell, why do men feel the need to want to parent in a disciplinarian style almost immediately to kind of get things moving in the right direction?
I think it's part of our makeup. As I'm not sure if Wessel wants to add something, but I think we have a tendency to take the lead. I think there's something about us. Just for instance, my wife and I, we went to the Drakensberg and we went on a little hike, and it was supposedly 6 kilometers, but the little arrow that said we need to turn back, I blissfully ignored, and I carried on. And my wife's like, didn't we get the 6 kilometer mark? And I'm like, no, we got to go more. And then I heard something of a waterfall, and I want to veer off. My wife's like, no, we got to stay on track. So I think men like to take the charge and the lead, and and suddenly they like, all right, I didn't work with my previous family, but this one I'm going to get right. And I think it's just in our nature to sort of like, I'm gonna bring my stamp down, and they're gonna know that this is the wrong person to mess with.
I'm the boss.
I'm the boss. Yeah. So yeah.
Is that a bad thing or a good thing?
I think it's both.
Here's a question for you. Let me bring the spring rolls over because I don't want them to get too cold here. Maybe we can snack while the other one's talking. Gentlemen, please enjoy, courtesy of the St. Andrew's pub here. Wessel, question for you. Single dads better parents or single moms?
I think that's really, really dependent on a case by case.
If you had to generalize it, just as a general, you're talking about good people here, good intentions, good hearts. Who is, generally speaking, the better parent? Single moms or single dads?
Yeah, we've got it's so funny that you asked that, Bob, because this is one of the exercises that we do in our workshops. And we stick a sign on the one wall saying agree and the sign on the other wall that says disagree. And we ask, who's a better parent, a single mom or a single dad? And quite often you have the group split on both sides. A dominant argument that I've heard a lot, and I think I would support that as well, is that because women have been exposed to caregiving and expected to care, they have had the socialization, the normalization of caregiving. They've had much more practice and exposure to that. As a generalization, without any deliberate effort by any parent, I would say that at a base level, mothers are likely to be better parents because of the societal expectation of that. That's exactly the thing that we're trying to change at Men Care, is, at a genetic level, besides pregnancy and breastfeeding, there's nothing that prevents a man from being as good a caregiver as a woman, besides pregnancy and breastfeeding. Those are the only two biological advantages. The rest are purely socially constructed, at least from my perspective and from what the evidence says.
My anecdotal observation is that in modern times, men these days, 30-year-olds in 2024, tend to parent older kids better than they do younger kids. So let's take it up to the age of, say, 5 or 6. I think, in my observation, women are better at caring for young kids, newborns, toddlers, and so forth. And then I think, after that, from 5, 6 onwards, my observations are that modern men become better parents. What do you think?
No, sure, and I mean, my perspective on that is that it's harder work before 5. Before the first 5 years are really hard work. By 5 and 6, men tend to, at least from our surveys and from my own experience, I'm much more comfortable playing with my children and doing fun things with them, which is important. That's an aspect of caregiving. But there's also the harder, more laborious routine work, and there's much more of that in the first 5 years. And I think that's also the expectation, and it goes right through, not only from families' expectations, but to laws like maternity leave and parenting leave. That's now changed in South Africa, thankfully, and that's a really big shift. But I want to say something about that. I also want to get back to the disciplinarian point. But the point about single dads, when we, in my own experience as a father, and I think this might be a good point for a blended family as well, when we encourage fathers to become more involved in caregiving, we encourage solo time on your own, and more time than 3 days. So not just mom goes away for a weekend, a spa weekend, but 4 days or 5 days or 6 days. Because at that point, you can't really depend on takeaways, and at some point somebody needs to start doing the laundry. So the actual work of supporting the child kicks in around 4 days. And that's also when the child opens up, when bonding happens, when attachment happens, when there's more of a connection between father and child. The other point about disciplinarianism or the, starting with a strong framework and then, or not. My first job was as a kindergarten teacher. I worked for 3 years and that's why I got interested in men and care. I worked for 3 years with classrooms of, first I ran a play group, 3 to 4 year olds for 2 years, and then I ran a kindergarten class for 5 and 6 year olds. And our mentor, our teacher, Veronica, she's a fantastic mentor. She when we did the module about discipline in the class, she was very clear and she drummed it into us. You start with a strong set of rules and you start with a clear disciplinary framework. And then you can relax. It's much harder to do it the other way around. If you start laissez-faire, open, relaxed, and then you realize, oh, the wheels are falling off, and then you try and rein it in, which I think all of us do anyway. That's what I did with my children. I tried to be really clear. And, I've also worked on advocacy around corporal punishment and positive parenting and to be honest, my conclusion is that positive parenting works with other people's children. You know, it's like I've got great advice for other parents.
Is positive parenting and conscious discipline the same thing, or is there some overlaps there? Pretty
no,
much?
I think it's the same. I mean, I don't use corporal punishment. I just mean that all the advice I've given to other parents, I find really hard to implement.
That's just human nature, though, isn't it? Cornell, is it? And Wessel makes an interesting point around, and I think the best way to sum it up is that when you start out, when you meet your new partner's kids, say, and you are now in a full-on relationship and you may be planning to get married in a few months' time, you want to be the cool guy. You want to come across as, I'm going to be a cool dad. You don't have to worry about me. You know, we're going to play and we're going to have fun. And then when the day-to-day domesticity happens and you realize, oops, there's a few things here that need to change, and maybe for the better, right? Maybe you want to instill a bedtime, or maybe you want to change nutrition and have everybody eat healthily. That's going to become harder now because that's automatically not going to make you cool anymore.
So I think the Wessel has raised it that when you start out and you're not clear as to what is expected, but I first want to say that you and your wife or you and your spouse need to determine how we're going to do this, and it's not sort of like just sort of like bumble into us. I think it's so important that we communicate. Listen, you've got 2 kids, I've got a kid. They're about the same age, and when my son comes over, what we're going to do, I think it's so important that there's a discussion as to not sort of like just see what the next moment brings. And when we do give clear boundaries, we're actually securing our kids. The clearer the boundary, the more the kid can test it and it doesn't move. But in today's dispensation with so much stuff happening, parents are just tired. And when it get to tonight and they got to get the kids in, say, at a certain time, they're like, I just don't have the energy for this. Yeah. And then they relent on that line, and then tomorrow night they want to enforce it, and that becomes confusing to the child. And the child's like saying, no, which one do I follow? Last night or tonight? And now I get into trouble for this, but last night it was fine. So I think I want to maybe say to the parents and to the dads that many times it's because of our lack of giving a good, clear, directive. That's what's causing the chaos in many homes. I'm not putting it specifically to the dad, but I think parents, they fail to give clear boundaries.
It's also a matter of consistency.
Yes.
And do the same thing over and over and over again, so that you reinforce that whole thing. But I mean, it's a number of challenges all at once, if you think about it. I mean, it's a new relationship. It's a brand new household. It's a new marriage, so you're trying to get to know each other still in a marital context. You're parenting and you're bringing kids into that scenario as well. So you're marrying a woman, and you're marrying her child or her kids, and you've got to learn that kid's behavior, and you still got to deal with, say, her ex, who might be a difficult individual as well. So you're thrown with quite a few challenges all at once, aren't you?
And I think that is where we would say to the couple, are you grounded? Have you made sufficient time to sort out what would be some common values? Because I believe that when you think about building a house, you go and buy a plot, you walk on the plot, the next day you sit down and you start drawing some rough ideas as to how the house would look like. So there's a long run-up before you even have the builders come on site to dig the trenches and to start with the foundation. So there's a preparation in just building just a basic house. But I think, and I found it so many times with so many couples, is that they just rush in and there's no foundation or very flimsy foundation. And that foundation, I would say, is I've got values and my partner's got values. But it's just to say that we've got values, it doesn't mean that we share the same understanding of the value that we bring to the relationship. So something like, say, respect. The child might backchat my partner, in her home, but in my home, my kids don't backchat me. So now suddenly we have this issue, and she's like saying, but the child is showing me respect. And I'm like, but we differ on how we understand respect.
Exactly. The definition of respect is what matters here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not been sorted. It's not, and now we want to put weight on that. So my understanding of values is that when we come together and we start to learn about each other, we start to clarify what is your values and what is my values. And as we clarify it, we start to put some building blocks in place. And that is, it's interdependent. We are interdependent on each person's values. I can't just have my values, say of trust or loyalty, integrity, but it differs from yours. We've got to clarify that. Now, once we have that as a foundation, I go up as a single person on the one side, the one wall. My partner goes up on the other side, and we are independent in terms of our daily life and where we go, where we meet. You can't phone your wife and say, listen, I'm doing an interview, can you come and help me? What must I say? What must I do there? You're independent in your life to life, day-to-day tasks that you do. But when you come home, there's this joint dependency in terms of our values. And then the two walls, that's you and your wife. Then the roof is your kids. Now, when you put the roof on the two walls, but the foundation is brittle, you have a collapse.
You have a bit of a problem here. So it's very important, actually, that the two individuals, no matter how much they are in love with one another, that they actually have a fairly practical, logical, reasonable conversation and communicate and see whether there is a synergy in values, whether they can actually live together. And it might be, I think, smarter for them to say, look, this is maybe not a great idea, because our values are just too different. But let me put a very specific challenge or a very specific example to you. And it, again, addresses a specific issue that I've heard often men have and is fairly general in the blended family setup. From a man's perspective, she has a child or children from her previous relationship. Whose rules should be most applied in this new home? Is it my rules as the man who's just married her, or is it their father's rules who lives in another house?
You're asking me?
I'm asking either one of you, but you go for it, Cornell.
So I would say that what I tell blended families is that you are a new nucleus, and that nucleus has to function. So I can't go according to what happens, say, at my spouse's or my ex-spouse's house, because when that child comes into our home, and that's why it's not just my rules, and this is how it will be. It's in that co-joint understanding of what do the two of us want, because this is our home, and these are the rules that would sort of regulate our kids. And I try to assist parents in saying that it's not your kids and my kids, it's our kids. And once we get it's because there's usually...
When you say our, do you mean the exes as well? Are they part of the our?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
You see, because that's her child. And this is my child. So, but when I'm saying it's your children, it's always the problem. Third world starts,
Yes.
Third World War starts. So it's like, it's not your child and my child. It's like, we need to work out our children. How are we going to manage our children? And as soon as you make that our, it's definitely showing the kid that the two of us have got consensus.
Yes, it's the unified front, isn't it?
And once you have that consensus, that's the biggest issue I think parents have in a blended family is when they marry their partner, do they give access to that partner in the whole aspect, or is it limited to the sense of I will love you, I'll be your partner, but once my kids come, they take priority. And when that happens, that's when we see
another fallout.
That's where many problems come. It's because it's like when the children walk into the home, the children are clever. Wessel has said that, don't underestimate kids.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree, because kids, they they will test. They will see the look. They might not. You might not say anything ugly to your spouse, but they would see the response or the face or the
Body
tense up-
language, yes,
body
tone,
language.
tone of voice, yeah.
And the kids, they're like, aha.
Opportunity. An opportunity has arisen, yeah.
Yes.
And they'll manipulate, you're right.
Absolutely, because it's a short-term gain, but that's how kids are.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as lovely as your child is, that little child is a selfish little child that wants to see what maximum benefit can he or she get out of the moment. Doesn't matter about tomorrow. That's not important. It's like, what can I get today?
Yeah.
And if they can find a little sort of like crack between mom and dad, and they can see there's something going, then they drive it.
You know, I know a story about this fairly recently, actually. Friends of mine, I'd visited them, and their daughter, who is I think 16 or 17, had gone out to a friend, some party that she'd gone to, and they were sort of saying, you know, how they hope she enjoys it, and it's some male friend of hers, and we had a bit of a laugh around that. Do they like each other? No, it's just a male friend. And then the mom said to me, no, the only reason I let her go is because her dad said it's fine. And then the dad was there, and he said, but the only reason I said she could go is because you said it's fine. Turns out what had happened was she had gone to mom and said, Mom, can I go?
Classic.
And mom said, you can go if your dad's okay with it. Then she went to dad and said, Dad, mom says I can go if it's okay with you. And dad was like, oh, if it's okay with your mom, it's fine with me. And that's how she manipulated the whole situation and ended up going. I mean, it wasn't a serious matter, but that's what kids do. They listen very, very carefully. Let me move over to you, Wessel. It's a serious question, because I think there is and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's actually a nuclear blended family. And the nuclear blended family, in my view, is he has got a child from a previous relationship, so does she, and they perhaps have a child together. And that to me seems to be where it's at the moment. There seems to be a jealousy aspect, which I want to talk about this new child now, the glue, let's say, you know, keeping the families together. But there also seems to be an issue with, say, from a male perspective, her ex, who still wants to have a hand in how his child is raised. Nothing wrong with that. But he might want rules, so when the child is visiting him, let's say that child is allowed to go to bed at midnight. But in my home, bedtime is 9 o'clock. Which rule takes precedence?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to figure this out with my wife and our children, and we are not a blended family. You know, trying to figure out what are our shared values. And you were talking about the values earlier, Cornell, and I think it applies to a point we were talking about earlier as well. My partner and I, when we got married fairly late. We had both been through several relationships beforehand, and I got to a point where I realized that I keep on compensating for my previous partner with my next partner.
Aha.
I keep on picking somebody who's different from the previous one. And when is the pendulum going to center to who I am and what I have to do, or what my patterns are? So I think in what you were saying earlier about the divorce rate of blended families, that might be a dynamic that plays in there as well, is that you look for something different from the challenges that you had. Unfortunately, often I realized I took my challenges with me. It's actually me. You know, it's my problems that I have to solve. It's not necessarily the other person's issues. When am I going to learn to digest, manage, work with these patterns that I carry with me, and then really check, is this partnership working or not? Because 99 out of 100 times, it was actually my stuff rather than the relationship or the other person. And I do think when one is responsible for children, there's the responsibility of being really diligent about knowing what you're bringing into a relationship, you know, for yourself. So my partner and I, we married before we had children, and I mean our kids are adopted, so it was a very deliberate choice later on. But we were so, I guess, traumatized from our previous relationships that we were pedantic, I might even say anal, about being very deliberate about, do we match each other or not? So we did the values exercise. We wrote down our top 10 values each, and we compared them. And like, oh, that's more important to you than to me. Oh, friendship is important to me, but family is important to you. You know, like nature is important to me, but for you it's important to have a good night on the town. So we did that exercise, and we spent a few weeks on it.
Good.
And that, I think, it was so valuable for us to start like that. I've had the criticism that that's a really boring way to fall in love, but we were already in love by the time we did that.
Yeah.
And I have to say that we reflect back on that sometimes, and we reflect how important that is. That really, really, really made a really important difference in how we are with each other. So I think what you were saying about the blended families and the single dad. What was your question again? Sorry, I got lost here.
You know, you're married to a woman who's got a child from a previous relationship.
Yes, exactly.
And that child maybe visits their dad.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
He's a strong character. He's got rules, but you've got rules, and they clash.
You know, maybe my perspective on this would be what I see about the extended family. So the nuclear family is actually quite new. It's extended families have always been the way that. Well, it's the extended families. In other words, it's the kids are not only exposed to mom, dad, but they're exposed to auntie, uncle, grandfather, grandma, and you know, in South Africa under apartheid, you know, my colleague at UCT, Prof. Elena Moore, has documented this a lot, that caring systems have kind of been romanticized with our lens of Ubuntu on that. And it's good to see that people are interdependent as a group, a caring network, but that also emerged out of necessity because of lack of resources. You know, so that was a really important.
Yeah, grandma had to take care of you because there was nothing else. I had to go to work.
Exactly. So I think, you know, so my analogy to a blended family would be that when my kids visit my mother and father, it's really important to me that they don't get to do all the tricks that they don't manage to do in my house. So in other words, that we keep the level of sugar more or less the same in two households, for example. We keep the level of screen time more or less the same in the two households.
But you could be dealing with a very difficult ex.
No, exactly. So you know, so in an ideal world, the family advocate does offer the opportunity for separating parents to work on a family plan and a parenting plan together. So there is a way to do that, and at least for the children to have some consistency. Because my concern would be if a child moves between three households, you know, or two households, well, three with the grandparents, but at least two households, and it's not fair on the children to have them have to deal with two different sets of disciplinary frameworks in the two different households. So
absolutely.
I agree with Cornell, like that's a conversation to have between the new spouses. Unfortunately, that's also a conversation I believe has to happen with the exes.
Wouldn't that be lovely? And I'm glad we ended up there because it's a conversation that's so essential and so necessary. I'm going to give you a moment to have final thoughts on this. But wouldn't it be lovely if we were all equally reasonable, because we are all unreasonable to somebody else. But if we were equally reasonable and we could sit down with our new partners and pull our exes into that conversation along with their new partners and have a conversation that benefits the kids, because that's ultimately what it's about, isn't it? Where we go, okay, well, we are all one big network of parents that are going to affect these kids in some way or the other. Let's have ongoing conversations. Let's have lunch every 6 months, say, and bash out a framework for what happens at my house, happens at your house, and this is how the nutrition and the discipline and all of those kinds of things work. Wouldn't that be lovely, Cornell? Wouldn't that be the ideal scenario?
Well, I think that in where we're at as human beings, I think mutual respect is so crucial, because it's not that I dismiss what happens in my ex's home. And I think the animosity many times between the partners brings turbulence when it comes to disciplining the kids, which is unfortunate. And for me, it's like, can we separate that your issues should not filter through in how the kids are being brought up?
So I think, just to kind of finish off a little bit, I'm really curious about the specific circumstance where there's a rule that, and you know, sometimes exes can be difficult, they can be hard to deal with. They're angry, they're hurt, maybe there was infidelity, and they can't quite see clearly that the kids matter most. And they might implement rules that are destructive to my household. So when the child goes there, goes to bed at midnight, and I want them to go to bed at 9, how do you deal with situations like that?
Yeah, I think the reality is that what did cause the breakup, and there's partners that's hurting, and in a way they want to get back at their partner, and the kids are paying the price, unfortunately, and I think that is where parents themselves are, because they're hurting, they are not thinking wider as to what would benefit the kids best. So if I can mess up my child's going to bed, say, at midnight, even though I know it's not good for him, and you battle the next week to get him back into a routine of 8 o'clock, I'm going to smile about it.
Yeah, because I'm winning, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
And I'm like saying,
winning the battle.
it's terrible because there's no mutual respect as to, let's separate our issues from that we have got kids to raise. And it's not that, but my rules are better. It's like saying, what can we do as your household, my household, where the four of us can perhaps get to a place where if my child is being disciplined in my home, he can't have his tablet, and he goes to your home, that you understand it's part of the discipline process, and you can't give him now another tablet because this is part of his discipline. And when kids see that they can't get away with ruling the roost from one home to the next, it definitely dampens the chaos and the hurt that we find parents are so exhausted of trying to discipline kids. Because the parents, I want to put it to the parents, it's the parents that has to set the pace and to take the lead and to show the initiative. And many parents leave it to the kids. And I'm saying to the parents, there are many kids that don't even know what they don't know. And then they are being said, all right, you can decide what you want to watch on social media or how late you want to go to bed. And I'm like, no, that's why you call a parent. You need to parent your child. And if he's in your home, then you do so.
And kids respond well to that sort of thing. Final thoughts from you, Wessel?
So two things, Bobby. I really appreciate what Cornell has just said, that you have to parent. And, you know, in this conversation, we've spoken a lot about discipline and how to manage discipline across more than one household. But I do think that there's also a really important imperative on parents to think about how to share the warmth, the nurturing, the good times, the nice things that children do across both households. And that might release some of the pressure on figuring out the discipline, is if you figure out how to spend time together. And a really, really important starting point is being together, you know, being proximal, being close to each other and spending time together. You know, ideally one would say without screens, but sometimes it's okay with screens. But, you know, I have the most amazing conversations with my son when we're driving, when we're not sitting like this talking, but when we're looking at other things and he has this random amazing thing that he says. So just that spending time together, and then thinking about, as a father to children that are in two households, how do I show them that I'm warm, that I'm nurturing? How do we spend time together? How do I show them that I'm confident in them, they've got this, they can do this. So, and that, you know, balancing a bit, it might be easier to negotiate how to spend good time together, and that might then release the pressure on trying to figure out how to manage the difficulties. That's the first thing. The other thing is that in our work, we often hear and we often come across the topic of absent fathers. And you know, the familiar statistic that you often hear in the media or you see on advertisements or that you often hear is that 2/3 of children grow up without a dad. And that's actually a fallacy. That number is actually a reflection of kids living with their biological fathers. only 1/3 of children, so 36% of children, live with their biological father. But that doesn't mean they're not being fathered. They can still be parented by other men, whether it's a new partner to the mother, whether it's an older brother, whether it's a social father, etc. I fell off my chair when I actually looked at, and it wasn't even our research, it's the household survey, the statistics in the country show that 80%, 78% of children in 2021 lived in a household with a man. 80% of children live with a man.
Well, that just bucks the whole idea, doesn't it?
So, to be clear, it's a man. It could be a grandfather, an uncle, an older brother, a new partner. We don't know that. We just know that children, from the census data, children co-reside with men. So mostly it's true that children don't live on this weird planet where there's no men. Most of the children in the country live in households where there's men present. And I think that really, really nudges us, or pushes us, not even nudge, but it throws us into the thinking of how do we invest in getting those children the parenting they need from the men that they do live with. So whether it's a new father in a blended family, whether it's an uncle, whether it's a grandfather, it completely flips the lens on trying to deal with getting the absent dad back into the house. It's rather invest in how do we animate the man who is there.
That's amazing. These are such deep and valuable insights. I think we can go on with these things forever and ever. I'm going to do a second podcast with Cornell and with Wessel about some of the things, some of the touch points that came out of here that I got flagged in my head as it was being said. But I'm conscious of the time. I know you guys have got stuff to do as well. But your comments, your suggestions down in the comment section, please, about what you thought of this. And if there's a particular topic you'd like us to tackle in the blended agenda landscape. See you next time.